Really pleased to be here. It's been a long journey. Actually, we started last year when we first met at one of the CASA session, which is a great program that the Hochschule has to educate people about different technologies, including blockchain. And we did a deep dive into self-sovereign identity and what it can do. And then we followed up with Matthias and started to think, well, what can we do here in Switzerland, right? Essentially what we want to talk about is the result of this conversation, what we came up with, and how we basically combining the possibilities that public transportation has and needs for a digital identity with the self-sovereign identity technology, right? So we're going to talk about it. We're actually going to do a demo. So it's not just slides, it's actually working prototype, and we'll talk about what we're doing next and also how we're going to build hopefully a Swiss ecosystem to support self-sovereign identity and build more applications. So let me start with just a small introduction, and maybe Matthias, you can talk a little bit about the context and introduce people to Swiss Pass and so on.
Of course, thanks Vasily. My name is Matthias Meyer. On behalf of public transport, I'm responsible to maintain and develop the central backend of Swiss public transport called the Nova ecosystem. On that platform, we have all the 243 transport operators combined together with the 23 regional tariff regions. And one important aspect is that we have one common key, the Swiss Pass. I guess most of you already has it in the pocket, this nice red card. So 4 million holders we have, and we see it afterwards for the proof of concept. Even more important is that out of these 4 million, about 1.5 million users already have the digital Swiss Pass on their smartphones. I guess you can go to the next slide. That's what I mentioned before. So the Swiss Pass is the key to public transport in Switzerland and also to numerous partner services. As mentioned, 1.5 million people use the digital ID representation. And very important, all these digital Swiss passes are ID checked. So they are verified on the point of sale based on your native ID card you have to show.
And also, I guess what's important to say is that this is already a digital credential in a way, because we're using this a very, very nice, I think, mobile application where people integrate the Swiss card identity with the mobile application to buy the ticket, to present their various subscription to transportation services in Switzerland. So it's already there. And we just ask ourselves, well, how can we introduce self-sovereign identity, which would also make it more privacy oriented, right? And more useful for other type of applications. So we talked about the possible first steps, just to make it maybe not such a big project at first, but really sort of verify how we can integrate these things, how we can bring this concept, and what kind of first steps we can make, right? So we came up with this idea that maybe we can start with with interesting applications of age verification. A lot of people talk about it, but how many people actually implement it, right? So that's what we started to do.
Yeah, Vasily, you already mentioned it. For public transport, the protection of customer data is key. We have, with the proof of concept, the goal to show that the Swiss Pass can protect people's privacy. And so the goal was enhancing privacy and trust in the most convenient possible way for the users. So in Switzerland, you know that there are thousands of point of sales where everyone can buy alcoholic beverages, for example. And as they are age-restricted products, the seller needs to verify who's buying this product. And nowadays, what all the youth has to do, they have to present their ID card to make sure that they are over the necessary age. But of course, there are two aspects. Why should I present my ID card to a stranger? And the other thing is, looking from the seller point of view, calculating a birth date or year. Is the person in front of me older or not than a certain limit is not so easy, as my daughter found out when she was a test buyer for alcohol and got beer, even that she only was 15 years at that time. So making the process anonymous and, on the other hand, secure for both parties, I think that's what we can show with this proof of concept.
Right, and I would also add, for the people who have not been to Switzerland or probably not that familiar, the interesting system here in Switzerland is that actually on Sundays you cannot buy anything anywhere. Everything is pretty much closed unless you go to a train station or a gas station. And of course, that's the reason why there's so many kiosks at every train station. You can buy like all the small items, and so a lot of people use it. So this age and kiosks, they try to be like a small universal shop. They try to offer all kinds of different things. They continue offering different products, including gaming cards and all kinds of different things. So for them to sort of be able to, on one hand side, offer these items 7 days a week, is important, while they need to comply with certain regulatory requirements, like the products we talked about, like the smoking products, the cigarettes, the alcohol, and many other products that might require some sort of verification and things like that. So it's a practical problem to solve, actually. Right, so here maybe I want to talk a little about, remind everybody why we believe that self-sovereign identity actually helps with solving the problem of preserving people's privacy, and talk a little bit about fundamentals of the technology. So first of all, the reason why self-sovereign identity is called self-sovereign is not because people create their own identity, right? It's not the case. The idea is that it's centered around the holder, or sometimes called the subject. So the person who is supposed to sort of acquire and store claims. In our case, we actually getting these credentials from Swiss train services, from SBB. Right, that verify a government-issued document and then create a certification, attestation that the holder, or I, for example, if I have my digital wallet, right, or Swiss Pass integrated with self-sovereign identity, can have, right? So I store it, I'm carrying it with me. So it's identity that I own, but that was verified from a trustworthy source, right? So after that, what happens is I store it and I trust my repository. So I'm using a software that's secure, right? And then I also can, if I want to, create a public identity on identity register, right? So and it is important that we have this register, and that's where the blockchain, for example, comes into play, that we know that this registry cannot be corrupted, right? In other words, if there's a public identity from SBB, for example, we know that nobody tampered with it, right? Because we have a history that's secured by a certain type of technology, right? So then comes the issuer. And the issuer in this case would be SBB, or it can be driver's license agency, or it can be a bank, it can be an employer, and so on and so forth, right? So what they do, they also register their identity within the incorruptible sort of registry, and then they create an issue, right? They create, sorry, not an issue, they create a claim, they issue a claim that we trust is going to be correct, right? So they did the job, they verify the identity, and irrevocable. What it means is that they can also publish a data in a privacy-preserving manner, where people who rely on this claim can say, oh, this is no longer valid. Like, for example, my Swiss Pass has expired, right? Or my driver license has expired, or I'm no longer working for somebody, things like that. So it's important to do that. And then finally, we have the people who will be verifying. In our case, this is the workers at kiosk. And of course, each kiosk as a large enterprise will have their own identity. And I, as a buyer, will present my digital credential that, hey, I'm a certain age. And all they need to do is just to basically, they just need to verify the signature, right, that relates to the identity of the issuer, right? So what happens here is what's revolutionary about self-sovereign identity is that the the relier, right, the inspector verifier, the people who need to verify the document, they don't need to have a direct relationship with the issuer. They don't need to have a contract. They don't need to have some sort of API. They don't need to have access to any databases. All they need to do, they just go to the registry, they look up the identity of the issuer of the claim, they verify the signature is correct, it has not been revoked, and then they trust it, right? Basically, so that's really the interesting aspect of self-sovereign identity and why we believe that's important. The other thing that we'll mention also is that when you present these claims, like for example, our age credential, we can do a zero knowledge proof. We don't have to actually to share the exact birth date. We can basically prove in a verifiable sort of mathematical manner that the age is above or below a certain threshold, right? So that's the important thing. So what we've done, the solution that we've built to verify it, we actually leveraged technology that's developed within the Hyperledger Alliance, specifically, Hyperledger Indy and Hyperledger Areas. Those are two projects which maintain in open source technologies that were originally developed by Sovereign Foundation, one of the sort of pioneers to create a comprehensive solution to introduce self-sovereign identity, right? And we build a mobile application, we build the cloud agents, which allow us to essentially do everything we described before, which is to verify, which age you are, which age group you are. You can prove it. The verifiers can receive the age proof and check it. So, as I mentioned, we hiding the data from the verifier, so they don't actually know the exact birth date or even name of a person, right? But they can verify. So how does this work? Essentially, this is a set of screenshots, from the application. You will see it shortly as well. So what happens is, so the first step is, each of the kiosks, they will have either a mobile app or an app integrated into their post-sale machine, and they basically create a QR code that the person with the wallet in the future will integrate it with the Swiss Pass. They can basically scan this QR code, right? And that will be a request for them to present a credential. So, and the way the technology works, everything is transparent. They will see they actually connecting to somebody, they know who that is, and they know exactly what they're requesting, right? So they can agree or not agree to share a certain credential. That's a very important feature of privacy measures. And they get the notification here, and then they just basically agree to share it, right? So what happens on the kiosk side of things, they will get a picture. So we also, what we've done to make sure that people don't just pass, each other their mobile phones, is that they will see the picture. A picture will also be signed by the signature, so we know it's exactly the person who we're looking at, and it will also automatically indicate if the person within a certain age group or not, right? So that nobody has to calculate anything. They can just say, hey, we checked it, right? And then the sale happens, right, or not, depending on whether or not the person falls into a certain age category. Right, so maybe we should do a demo.
Of course.
Right, let me stop sharing.
Let me share my screen then.
Zoom cooperates, huh?
Where has my Zoom gone? Here.
Yeah, this one.
Full screen, share.
All right, and we have it.
May I ask you to play the role of the seller? You see here on the screen, we have the three mobile phones. One mobile phone has the verifier app on it, that is in Vasily's hand now. And we have the two devices of
Do you need to start the verifier?
Yes, please. Yep. So you see that on the verifier app, we have two categories for the two product groups. The ones that where you need to be 16 or older, and the one where you need to be 18 and older. So, and what the seller is not able to see, that I, as Emma, started my wallet app, and now I want to buy a beer with Vasily, and as he is not too good in math, he is happy to have the support of the verification process. He still doesn't see that I want to scan the QR code. You see now the QR code. I go to the QR code of the seller. QR code not
the demo effect.
Valid. Yeah,
so you guys know it's real.
Same.
Yeah, here we go.
Connection is verified. So now what Vasily mentioned is that I see what credentials want to be shared or why, what use case is used. So I see here the age group is verified, that I'm 16 plus, and that my photo for identification purpose is transferred. So we were too slow.
Yeah, so let's do it again.
Okay. It has been started, but we restart. Sending. We shouldn't talk too much and do it.
Yeah, people waiting in the queue, they want their beer, right?
Yeah, of course. So you see that it has been sent, but my age has not been proven, so that I'm not allowed to buy alcohol. But this
it actually sounds really good in German. Das Alter 16 plus wurde nicht bestätigt. Yeah, we know it's not.
So that's how the proof of concept is working, and how, thanks to zero knowledge proof, Emma in this case was not able to buy beer, but didn't have to show any of the private credentials to the seller.
To be on the market on the new phone, the date is March 16th.
Yeah.
That is 16. So
yeah, that's the demo effect too. Let's try it again.
Shall we?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
So you have to share again.
Yeah, you have to share again.
Yeah. So. Allow. No, the system doesn't want to have I should have tested it with David. Huh? So far, all the days it was okay, but today not. Let's close it. Let's close this one too. Maybe there were some problems with this. '16 plus. Scan the QR code. Start the verification. Allow. Now it's okay.
All right.
And now Vasily also can check if the image is corresponding with me.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. Well, I can say for the past nicht. Yeah, so it's not correct one. Yeah.
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 Sorry.
Yeah.
And of course the second use case with David, who is below 16, or you can choose whatever you want. It will be denied anyways. Should be working now as well.
Yeah.
I allow this verification, and you see.
Yes.
So he's
sneaky.
So.
Right. So yeah. So now you guys know it's actually real, right? So that's the good thing. Okay. Can you stop sharing? We can go back to the slides. All right. Okay. So basically, what's next, right? Obviously, this is a fairly simple use case, even though there's a lot of technology around it. So what we want to do beyond that, of course, we are thinking about what other use cases we want to start introducing and testing in real life across multiple different locations. Obviously, one of the things we have here in Switzerland and also many other countries is that people really like to do self-checkout, so they don't have to deal with longer queues, but also it helps with the virus as well, so you don't have to interact with people so much. So that's an interesting use case. And obviously, here in Switzerland, what happens if you try to check out an alcohol product, you actually have to wait for a person to come in and verify that you're of a certain age. So we can avoid that. That would be an easy one. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening around clubs, not only because of age, also because of credentials, that in case there is COVID case, people can follow up. There's tracing up, but maybe we can also use with the credential. That would be another interesting use case. Also, people who come and check various devices at the home, for example, water meter, for example, and you need to inspect this. We want to make sure these people come from the proper company, not just impersonating somebody. The same thing actually happens, I think, a lot of SVB when people actually come and service the trains and also train stations and things like that, right? And integration with mobility, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, as the Swiss Pass is a full ecosystem, also going towards multimodal mobility, we will connect multiple identities. Also, a car will then be an identity that needs to prove if someone's driver license is valid or not. Otherwise, the car has to deny starting or using its service. So there are a lot of use cases we can think of when we start integrating such technology into mobility as well.
We just got a question from Tim, and he asks, for this fully automated self-checkout, how do you verify, or how do you plan to verify the picture? Because they're easily verify that I'm above 16, or then I still can use your phone.
Correct.
How do you think about verifying the picture?
Yeah, the picture is one sort of biometric information, but in the next step, I think to be able to do it better than one of the biggest retailers that is able allow you to slip through your ID card. So you take mine and you're fair. We need to prove that the person that is holding the device in their hand is the one that owns the wallet inside. Mm-hmm. So that must be a biometric proof, for example, based on Face ID from the device or based on the fingerprint ID from the device, that there's the way to prove that the person that unlocked the device is the person that owns the wallet inside.
So you're not thinking about verifying at the point of sale that the person is, or that you try to verify that the person that uses the device is actually the person.
Yes. If we would do this, we would need to provide biometrical information to the point of sale, and that by its own is very critical, because then you would be able to lock that I was here and bought 10 bottles of whiskey. And the next time I come again, buying another 10 bottles, and
you could only do it by the picture. So if you just provide the picture, then you make actually check whether the picture, the person is actually the person. That you make just the picture check.
As long as it stays exactly, as long as it stays on the phone, and the phone together with the ecosystem is able to perform this check. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Or what you could do is actually at the point of sale with a camera.
Yes.
And then what you provide is actually provide a picture to the point of sale.
Yes.
And then the camera has to verify that actually you get it right.
That is correct. It's actually very similar to how biometric passports work, because you do exactly this. You know, when you scan it at the border, they actually get a signed picture from your chip, and then they can automatically or manually verify that you actually match that picture. Yeah, but we try also to see if we can also share just maybe the biometric vector, not the biometric information itself, so the machines can prove that these vectors match, right? There's also technology like that. So we're still looking at how to make it even more robust and even more privacy preserving. Right?
As you just said, if you just do the verification on your mobile phone or your device, then it's already solved. You don't have to provide any information.
Yeah, and no one needs additional hardware.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Right.
I think integrating a lot of hardware at certain places is not.
Right.
If you say, for example, fingerprint, what if I say I don't want to share fingerprint with Apple or anyone, so I don't have it registered? Then
Or you're free to show your ID card anyways.
okay, so this is basically the backup system, but it's a bit inconvenient. It's cooler if everything is fully automated, and I think
Yeah, but look, if you want to participate in a fully automated system, you need to provide the system with information that it can work. So it depends on from what angle you come. So of course, if you do not want to share the fingerprint with the hardware on your device, or not willing to that your face is recognized by a camera somewhere, yeah, the digitalization has limitations then.
I think that's exactly the question: is how do you make the system compliant with GDPR and all data privacy rules? Because if you then store all the pictures again on a centralized server at SBB or Apple or anywhere, you still run the same problem. And companies nowadays, especially with the whole tightening of the data privacy laws, prefer to not host this data anymore.
You don't have to store this information because it's under the cardinal wallet, your picture.
Yeah.
It's only in there, and then you provide it from the wallet to from the wallet to the point of sale, and then they verify it. And if you don't like to provide this information, then at the point of sale, then a red alert will go up, and then a person will come and actually check. Then you have to show your traditional ID or something like that.
That's the reason why I mentioned before that for me it's important that as few information leave the device, your device, where you have the chance to maintain what you have on there. The more information we send to someone, yeah, what is the other entity doing with that information we can't control anymore. So the more information that stays on the device, the more we can make use of zero knowledge proof, where a central data Swiss pass ecosystem in this case is proving to you that his information is correct. Then you're fine. You don't need to have his information because we are telling you, yes, that's him, that's his information.
Right. So as we obviously we just talked about, certain types of credentials, we believe that we can extend and expand this list of credentials. So we're working on applications to manage all kinds of credentials within the ecosystem, and also thinking about the process, how to make onboarding and installation of wallets easier. So on this slide, you can see there's a couple of different ways we can do it. One is you basically go to, in future, to SBB Swiss Pass portal, you log in there and you select the option that yes, you want to get credentials, so you will get the QR code in your application that will have Identity Wallet integrated. You scan this QR code, you also will get recognition that hey, you offer the credential of Swiss Pass and you can accept it yourself. Or through the business ecosystem, SBB, in this case SBB itself, but also other like sister businesses or partners can start manage the credentials around Swiss Pass. They would be able to send either email or SMS or push notification to your phone that will be recognized by Identity Wallet, right? You will see what's being offered to you, you can accept it and then use it, right? So you do all these different things that we are thinking how to integrate it and make it experience seamless. I think it's also important to say that based on other projects that we do, and not only we, but other people in the worldwide, is that, while from technology standpoint, we really like this idea of digital credentials, what happens in real world is people who use it, they don't care that much about it, right? Maybe they should, but right now they just want to have a seamless experience. And so that's why we're spending so much time to make it easy and not necessarily highlight the fact that, hey, now you have Identity Wallet with all these different credentials. We just want to make sure that as they perform certain actions, it's all seamless, right? If I want to use a mobility car, I just check in. Yes, it will be powered by credentials, but people don't necessarily have to notice it. Or for example, I come into like a Sunrise shop and want to open an account to buy a new SIM card for internet access, for example, like for 5 5G, then I would be able to check in and would be able to share my information, but we can hide the fact that there's a complex technology behind it, right? So I think that's important for adoption.
Just received another question. Do you also plan actually going further and actually then use also, for example, use the Swiss Pass as a signing identifier for documents or so?
That's a good question. So maybe it's a good point to talk about Swiss SSI ecosystem, because to answer that question, and let's see, Matthias, if you agree, or if you guys in the audience agree, that essentially, you know, with technology we can do that, right? We can enable electronic signature, and in fact, in the European Union, what they do, they now run a project to integrate eIDAS, the European EU-based electronic signature, into self-certain identity. However, Switzerland is not part of EU; it has its own set of laws. And right now, the laws around electronic signature are being discussed further, right? It's not exactly clear from a legal standpoint if we can do it or not. And I would say that actually, you know, there's two dimensions or three dimensions. One is usability that we talk about. The second is maturity of technology. And the third, which is just as equally important, is legal certainty, right? So, and to answer all these questions, you know, we basically need to create this ecosystem of people with knowledge and applications and access to data who will be willing to work together to enable this, right? So, you know, we've been really inspired by the work that's been done by a Trust Over IP Foundation, which was created basically a month ago or so, based on experience from Sovereign and others. They have a very robust framework how to create alliances, how to create governance of people who are able to create, you know, identity and register it. Because if you remember my picture where I explained how SSI trust model works, you know, where does trust come from? It has to come from somewhere, right? The fact that I stored something on blockchain or a mutable ledger does not guarantee trust, right? Garbage in, garbage out forever, right? So how do we make sure that we can trust that information? That's governance process, right? It actually has to rely on known people that are registered, their identity is verified. We know that this identity exactly belongs to SBB, or this identity belongs to driver's license agency or a doctor, and so on and so forth. So for that, we need governance, right? And we also need to make this governance such that it's compatible with the laws in Switzerland, which, as I mentioned, are different from EU laws or other countries' laws, right? So that's important. So therefore, we need to have outreach and dialogue with legislators, right? With political parties, with lawyers, with people who are defining how to deal with law, right? So maybe, do you want to say something about that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part of the story is that we need use cases who are enhancing your everyday life. And that was the reason to step into this topic with a very easy to understand use case. And out of that, the creativity of people will be endless, where to step in next. And of course, there are boundaries that need to be lifted, or where we have to overcome, but time is playing with for us. So
that means actually also that we just mentioned it, that we also will allow credentials from other, let's say, suppliers.
Absolutely.
You're not only restricted to your Swiss Pass credentials.
Absolutely, because each different credential has a different assurance level. And of course, if I want to open a bank account with a microbank, they won't allow my Swiss Pass ID to be used to open that account. Exactly. But if I already have the microbank credentials in my wallet and I go to the UBS, KYC is done for them because, that's a FINMA verified identity. So of course, let's make use of the whole ecosystem, not just using the Swiss Pass. The Swiss Pass, with its ecosystem and 2 million digital identities, could be a very good starting point. Because we don't need to explain people what's in the background, but we already have all these users that are already using a digital identity. And as Vasily showed before, how to onboard them. It's easy to onboard them because they already have a login. It's just one click away and you have your digital verifiable identity.
Right, and you know, one of the things I guess we should mention is that you know, there's a great tradition in Switzerland to create these associations that work on this common topics and these common challenges. There's of course a very nice, you know, Swiss FinTech Innovation Association and others that cover these topics, and we felt that we actually need an association that will really promote the ideas and technology, but also legal challenges and usability questions and use cases around self-sovereign identity. So we are working right now to create a new association here in Switzerland called DIDAS, for Decentralized Identity Association. And we're doing it in partnership with Hochschule Luzern, SBB and others. And if you're interested in joining and help us, please let us know. We'll be more happy to have you as a member. We hopefully will announce it within next few weeks. Yeah, so watch out for the announcement, I would say. So yeah, so that's good. And maybe more questions that we can answer.
I just have a question, so not related directly to this use case, but several companies, especially in the e-health domain, have been in touch with us, and they say what big companies want is to have a pool of people they can ask for example, if you have diabetes, did you try this and that medicament, did you go well, so like studies, which medicaments work, which do not, and the point is, the data is very sensitive because you need to have patient records to a certain degree, so the companies don't want to store the data necessarily, but they want to get the insights. And then there's the question of trust versus truth. So the data that is stored, how true is it actually? So if someone says, I have diabetes, is it really true? Who validates that this person actually has diabetes?
Yes.
I mean, sure, you can say he has to go to a doctor who is like a verifier in the network, but that can get very complicated maybe. And if the person is compromised, so he's corrupt, for example, he will validate whatever, and then the whole system has issues. And my question is here, so from a governance perspective, I mean, now with SBB, it's a straightforward case, but what if you go into countries where the corruption is significantly higher? How would you perceive a solution from this point of view?
Look, I think you bring an important point, and I'm not sure if audience could hear the question. Could they?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, good. Just so I don't have to repeat it. Yeah, so look, the technology that we're dealing with relies on source of trust, right? So the problem that you mentioned, that somebody can be corrupt and create a credential that is not true, that is falsified. Can you solve it with technology? I don't think so, right? Because again, technology is just a way to communicate things, to store things, to verify that information that is exchanged is correct, that information has not been tampered with. But if from the beginning the information is not correct, you're verifying incorrect information, right? So obviously, that's why you need a lot of governance, and that's why this governance has to be specific to a local context. So obviously here in Switzerland, if you are a doctor, right, a licensed doctor, and we properly onboarded you, we verified your credential, the chances that you will falsify this data are probably very, very low, because the cost of losing your license are very, very high. So it's probably not worth it, right? But what can we do with technology? We can basically say that, hey, if you trust our governance processes, right? If we verified the person's identity, right? We verified his credentials, maybe electronically, maybe by paper, and gave him private keys to be able to create credentials, then you can trust us, right? So it exists within the societal context. So we always have to pay attention to it. In some other countries where the situation, especially in certain areas, might be not as robust, maybe there's incentive to lie, maybe it's not easy to catch people because of corruptions, because of other issues. Well, people have to kind of see, well, can they really benefit from this technology or not? Or maybe use additional means. Like, for example, there are people, I actually forgot the company's name right now, that are offering that, hey, in addition to being able to create credentials, you should be actually insuring the truthfulness of your information, right? So you also take an insurance, and if it has been proven that you gave a falsified credential, then the insurance will pay, right?
So you're very proof of stake.
Kind of like a proof of stake, yes. So there are other mechanisms that you can put on top of it to make the trust that much stronger, right? But it's not straightforward. It's more like a social type of issue that we have to use technology in context of, right?
The question is, how far can technology bring us to getting better standards for the validators? Can they use reputation system? Or as you just mentioned, proof of stake approach where you get punished, so you have to stake something, and if it turns out that you actually were saying this person has diabetes, even though he does not, or she does not, then this stake that you invested gets basically taken away. So that for me personally, that's where it gets really, really interesting, because there are a lot of use cases where we have this, it's a bit the scalability of problems you have with the validation of the credentials. At some point, you will have to have a large number of validators in a network, and you need to have a system in place to make sure that they don't.
True. I think that, obviously when we look at the larger sort of blockchain context, we can see that, on the public blockchain side, people are really sort of spending a lot of time and effort and research, doing a lot of interesting research around this reputation systems, this, game theory type of enabled use cases, and it's great. It's really great. At the same time, I think that we need to move in parallel. That would be my sort of idea, because at the same time, what are we talking about here, right? I think we're talking about the fact that, look, we have a working system today, and that system is not optimal for digital transformation, right? To enable digital processes, because it's all paper, right? Even if it's a PDF document or email, it's still paper because it's not structured. It's very difficult to verify it, automatically parse it out, and act upon the information. And we talk about the step where we take the existing ecosystem and really digitize it, right? We reinvent it in a way, right? And that's a great step in and of itself. What you are talking about, I think, is taking it further and decentralizing further, which we also should do. But I don't think we should lose the momentum of solving the existing issue. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, we are a long way. There's a long way in front of us until we can solve such interesting use cases as you mentioned. And we should go forward in small steps, in steps that are tangible for your mother, my mother as well, so they can get what it means to have a digital process in place. And after that, these high and really interesting cases will find a solution as well.
100% agree. Then one last question from my side. Since I agree also that you should definitely start with baby steps, with proving cases where it works. How do you see, so for example, if the pharmaceutical industry, or if, for example, the prescription is a typical use case, or some other things, or even for the Hyperledger, if you have English. So where you have those small cases, do you then see the Swiss pass as a basis for this, or do you think there should be different identification networks with some type of interoperability between them? What is your personal belief on this?
Yeah, I guess key to it is interoperability and open source. So having a system where everyone can hook in and make use of what others prepared is the key for me. It has to be open and not for profit though.
Sorry, elaborating a little bit on top of this, I completely agree, interoperability, open source, but then what is the economic incentive?
No. Look, public transport in Switzerland, for example. Is there an economic reason why you provide public transport? No. No one gains money with it. It's highly subsidized, but it's a service public for the whole Switzerland. And also here, when we compare these costs of running such a node with costs we have to maintain this central backend for public transport ticket calculation and all the money processes on it, it will be peanuts. But from a public point of view, it's essential that such system will exist in the future. And also internally, when I talk about this proof of concept, always the question is, yeah, how do we make money of it? And say, no, we don't. We provide the ecosystem with a public service and not with the goal of making money.
Correctly, you see it as a public utility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And the question just arise also, which was raised by Tim. Do you then also think about using the Swiss pass without having any SP3
Of course, you can get a Swiss pass also to benefit from all the partner services that are available without any half price fare card on it. Yes, that's already possible today. Or if you stop using your public transport abonnement, you still keep your Swiss pass. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it won't get invalid.
No, you don't.
Have any.
No, no.
Yeah, but to maybe add a little bit to the commercial aspect of it, I certainly agree with Matthias, and from experience in other projects, it all should start with the public utility, right? And that's why I think it's very, very important to find the stakeholders, right, that are naturally can support or bootstrap this ecosystem. But once you bootstrap the ecosystem, all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where the data that was previously locked into silos becomes available. And it becomes available in a way that people control it. They can decide how they deal with privacy. It's all transparent. And now you can start building commercial applications on top of it. You can start actually building more services. Yes, you use the ecosystem, but I think, and then again, that's why I think it's important to start not like a one large global network where everybody sits on it, because it's difficult to govern, it's difficult to agree on incentive. Yeah, you find the stakeholders within Switzerland. We know that, for example, in Finland, there's Findy community that found their stakeholders. They're doing this using exactly the same technology, right? European Union is financing their own ecosystem around diploma use case verification, for example. It's not a commercial use case, right? Here we can do it around transportation and other services. Fintech is very strong in Switzerland. Obviously healthcare is a big important topic because it's highly privatized and you need to exchange data, like you mentioned, right? And so on and so forth. So we find the right stakeholders, we bootstrap the ecosystem, we create the technology, we solve legal issues and challenges, right? And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a situation where the economy becomes much more competitive, right? Because it's digitized. You can do more use cases, you can build startups, you can offer new interesting things and monetize the system in this way, right? That would be my take on it.
Because you don't always need to make money from it, you can also cut costs.
Yeah,
just the other way around. So you can do it in both ways. But I do believe that you need to have both options. No,
absolutely. It's just that I think you move step by step. You solve a real issue. You solve sort of a fundamental problem. Like think about roads or railroads. Right? You cannot build a big network of roads unless it's subsidized, unless somebody bootstraps it. But once you've done it, hey, everybody benefits. The same goes for electricity and so on and so forth. You just cannot. With certain things, you cannot start from a commercial angle, right? So I think
absolutely true. Maybe you saw the news from the Swiss government where the Bundesrat announced on July 1st that they support the idea from the BAV, the Swiss Transport Authority, that they want to build up a digital infrastructure for mobility where mobility service providers and mobility platforms can interact with each other easily. So that's an infrastructure, and it's pushed by the government because they say infrastructures as well as digital infrastructures are the backbone for our society. So that's a great step forward. That's one puzzle piece with this proof of concept where we show the importance of digital infrastructures as well.
So any more questions? Anything we forgot to discuss, or?
Before Alex just mentioned about falsified information, I take a little bit, let's say, on the same direction, but not exactly the same. What about incomplete or not fully correct information? Because obviously, if you talk about IDs, these are binary information, so it's clear, or it's true or it's false. So, or that is my burden or is not. That's all. But if you start to expand and include other information, there can be information that are partially true. And then do you have already considered it? You have already an idea of how to tackle it? Because if you want to extend to other use cases, I think that is the next step. Because not all the information, unfortunately, are binary. I mean, as a computer scientist, you would love that, but that's not the case.
Okay, maybe I try to answer this. So, okay, so interesting thing about this technology, right? And we talk about a specific set of technologies, and of course the standards that are being developed. For example, W3C and the work that's been done in Decentralized Identity Foundation around DIDs and DID documents and different sort of ways they manage representation of credentials, right? So there's this concept of schema, right? And for those of you that are maybe not technical, schema is basically a definition of how a set of data looks like. What does it look like? What type of fields or parts it has? What type is it? A string? Is it a date? Is it a number? And so on and so forth. And then you specify very, very precisely what you're looking for, right? So in other words, when we create a credential for SwissPass, we create a schema that says that this set of data represents a SwissPass, or this set of data represents my insurance coverage, or this set of data represents this. So from that standpoint, we can really define precisely what information should be supplied, right? And which information is optional and which is not, to be considered to be valid credential, right? Now, the interesting case, from that standpoint, we can pretty much determine, are you allowed or not to create a credential? It should be always valid, right? Now, a combination of the interesting sort of aspect of this technology is what, for example, if I go to open up an account, right, with a mobile company or a bank, I need to provide not only my name and my date of birth, my registration, but other information as well. And maybe this information, I'm combining credentials from multiple sources together, right? And I'm selecting from these credentials which type of information I'm putting together and I'm sharing against a so-called proof request, because proof request is also defined, right? So the interesting thing, like for example, for fintech purposes, the FINMA, for example, can say, okay, if you want to onboard somebody, this is exactly the type of information, right? This exact type of fields that need to be provided for you to be compliant with KYC requirements, right? And so somebody receives that proof request, says, okay, so I need my date of birth, my registration information, so on and so forth. I have these credentials, so I'm selecting this data from these credentials, and I'm, sending it to the verify, right? Now, in complex cases, like for example, healthcare, where multiple people might be dealing with a person across the life cycle of a treatment, for example, you might need to have an orchestration system to make sure that the data that's been supplied is actually sufficient for the next step, right? So you can basically define an automated business process that will deal with decentralized entities and manage the life cycle. Maybe that would be an interesting way to look at the problem you just presented. And for example, you can do it with blockchain. So you can combine two technologies. You can combine smart contracts to automate the verification against the requirements of these different steps and credentials to make sure that you're compliant, right? So that would be one way to do it. But of course, you can expand it further and say, like, okay, but what if we have this more sort of extended decentralized ecosystem where the schemas are not well defined? Like was the Alex's point, hey, I mean, we want to decentralize things. We want to have this, variety of sources that people can trust based on reputation, based on stake, based on other things. Well, I guess there's ways to deal with that. They're not simple. And from my standpoint, we just have to see, what are the real issues and what are the real use cases, in terms of the information that can be supplied and can be acted upon in an automated manner to determine whether or not and how we deal with that, right? I hope it doesn't sound too abstract, but
no, absolutely. Sorry, if I understood correctly, your point of view is this is business logic. So
yes.
It's not part of the technical solution, it's
right.
part on the particular app or whatever that solve one problem. So you cannot have a general solution to that, and you leave it to the specific. Okay.
You know, in a way, I guess you cannot program life, right? So
Thankfully.
But that's an interesting question. So if you look at the databases, if you go back 20 years, and then everything was, even still it is freestyle, you can store anything the way you want in a regular database. But which leads us to the whole big data problem that we have a lot of semi and mainly unstructured data, which we afterwards need to process again to extract meaningful insights, which is complex, takes a lot of computational power. And now with SSID, we stand at the point where we can reinvent identity management to a certain degree, not fully, but it gives us a new set of tools. And maybe it would be important to rethink also the way we store data to apply a certain type of structure. I agree with you. Here, these labels, these input fields you have in the database, and you're supposed to store things here. But then the question is, if you store a wall of text, it's still okay, unstructured data. And by then having said, okay, we thought about this in advance, and we don't just apply the fields, we also need to have quality gates for the content, so the doctors from different countries can agree. Or for example, also for legal statements, because the languages in different countries are different. How can we manage this? And I think there comes also back one of the possible ways, how can you make money with such a system, is if you can build an oracle that is capable of managing the data structure, and does this provide computational power, validation, everything, and gets a financial compensation for providing the service. This could be a very interesting.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, to sum it up, what all these questions and discussion shows is that we only have a small, tiny step with this proof of concept, but we go in a direction where the field is open, and there's a lot of improvements needed from technology, from governance, from ourselves to give us into such topics. And that's highly interesting, and I'm looking very much forward to go in all these details over the next few years, I would say.
Absolutely. It's just even our short discussion shows that there are lots and lots of opportunities to take this technology further, right? And do interesting things. And we need the dialogue. We need people with different opinions and different viewpoints and different disciplines as well. Understanding the standards, understanding the technology, understanding legal, ethical issues, right? And real world problems. And that's why it's important to sort of build these associations, build these governance mechanisms. But maybe start small with solving real problems that work well. People understand it. People get used to it, and then we can build on top of it, right? So that would be my take. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can build within the next months and years.
Rene, back to you.
There are no questions from the audience, which is online here, apart from the question I already raised. I'd like to thank you very much for that you have made this presentation here. I think this is an interesting starting point. And also regarding the association Vasily just mentioned, I think this is a good starting point. We'll definitely go in this direction. The idea is actually to found this association in August or no later than September, and then really push these activities forward. I think you start, let's say, with this proof of concept, but I think this shows that actually there is quite a vast field which is open, and this ecosystem, a lot of stakeholders actually can participate in actually moving this towards a real ecosystem could be very interesting. And I think, as you just mentioned, there are not only technical questions, but also legal aspects and government aspects, these business processes. I think a lot of open questions that can be worked on will be quite interesting, and to see how we really can push Switzerland forward with this topic. I'd like to thank you very much, and very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.